Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where we explore ways to get healthy, wealthy, and wise. With a combination of guest interviews and solo episodes, I hope you will be inspired and motivated to become the best of whatever you are. I'm Elle Russ, #1 best-selling author and subject expert with over a decade of helping thousands of people across the globe. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about free guides, masterclasses, online courses, and more. Enjoy the show. Hey, everyone. One of my favorite guests, pals, fellow podcasters, fellow coaches is here today. I've interviewed her, I don't know, maybe at this point it might be 5 or 6 times over the years. Cassie Parks, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited, as always, to spend a little time with you and get to talk about things that we love.
And one of those things is money. And
yeah.
So let's get into that, because Cassie is a money mindset expert. She's also a master manifestor, fellow intention person like me. But and we have had a great story back in the day. Maybe if we have time, we'll share it, about how I manifested you and then you simultaneously manifested a $5 million mansion. That was great. So we've actually manifested together. So one of the things that's really key, you always talk about, is you have to identify your money story, and you've compartmentalized them into, like, I think, 4 or 5 categories that we will go through. Before we do that, I just want to get into giving everyone permission, and maybe you can just expand on what I'm about to say, which is, I remember growing up and it was like, it's so gauche to talk about money. Right. And gauche meaning left in French, which, by the way, left-handers are like, hey, but these restrictive beliefs or religious cultural teachings promoting this idea that desiring money might be morally wrong. The love of money is the root of all evil, right? Everyone's heard that, and that can kind of then be misinterpreted as money is evil. And what bugs me about this, wherever it came up, that somehow the desire for money and resources, like, inherently something's wrong with that, is crazy, because it's a primal instinct tied to our evolutionary need for safety and security. This is like, you cannot honor yourself inherently as a human more. So take that and give me your thoughts on that part before we get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I love the way they use permission, like just permission to be open, to let some of those fade away, even as Elle and I have a discussion, because sometimes it's just this awareness, and it can be as easy sometimes as like, I don't want that anymore, right? Like, I don't want, and really be open to what Elle said. Like, it is primal. It is the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For all of those things, you need money, right?
Yeah, I mean, so just, I want to delve into that further, right? So if you stored food and tools, you had a better chance of surviving winters and droughts, right? Like, these are just like, we're getting back into like hunter-gatherer stuff. This is like, also, in indigenous tribes, right? Leaders, chiefs, they had access to more resources. They were responsible for distributing them. And what did that do? Well, that increased their status and influence. No different now, right?
Right.
And so, or also, what about just, not only just building shelters, but gathering food, not just for like immediate consumption, but to ensure your future, right? Like saving for the future, but that happened there. So if we look at the modern parallel here, it's like financial stability or abundance, overflow, it provides a buffer, right? It always does. Real life, insecurities, job loss. And so that could be, oh no, now we're in a drought. You could just compare them, but it's primal. It's part of who we are. And I want people to get into being okay to want it.
Yes, absolutely. It is primal. I love this conversation. I talk about it in a little bit different way sometimes, but this is so good. Like, it is what we need. Like, and we need that buffer, right? And if you have this belief, that some of those beliefs Elle talked about in the beginning, where it's not okay to have that buffer, you're missing out. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not fulfilling that primal instinct and really the way that you need to live.
Yeah, to feel safe and also enjoy this life. I also want to do a couple things I've talked about before on various, I know you agree with me here. Too many people are judging how people spend their money or how they got it. I'm not saying you should, praise a cartel leader for getting money by, beheading people, right? Of course, like, but, like, for example, I heard someone say not too long ago, they were talking about rich people and they said, there's some people that get a new car every year. Who needs that? And I go, why do you even care? What if they want it?
Right.
Like, why does it matter? It's
Right.
interesting the way we judge because that person might judge you the way you spend it. Go, that's stupid. You're not even enjoying your life or whatever it is. Like a new car for me every year, not important. I mean, okay, but even if I just wouldn't want to do that, but that's not me. But there might be someone who loves cars. So I want you to talk to us a little bit about how judging and looking in the way other people spend their money, and then how that affects us and why we need to cut that shit out.
Yes. We need to cut that shit out. It's like, it's not our lane. It's none of our business. I got this question from one of my clients once. She goes, well, what if somebody's like not a good person, but they have all this? I'm like, it's none of your business. Like if you,
Well, or someone said to me, they go, that's not fair that so and so has all this money. They're such an evil, horrible human being. And I said, it is fair. They're thinking right about money. That doesn't mean they wake up and don't hate themselves, have terrible relationships, aren't sick, or whatever, right? But
right?
they are thinking right about money, and it's fair.
Yes, yeah, that's what they've created, and I have lots of examples. Of a friend of mine, and he, as a client, he's like, it's so interesting. He's so good with money, and then he tells me about his like personal life. He's like, he tells me, he tells me everything, and he's like, it does not match the money, right? So just because somebody is really has a lot of money doesn't mean they have all the things that you want, and it doesn't mean that it's not fair. I'm like, that's like, I don't know if it's timing with kids or whatever, but I have a 9-year old. It's not fair. It's not fair. And I'm like, oh, like, let's have a discussion. Like, nothing's fair. Like, they created that. This is what's happening. Like, that isn't even a discussion in our house, right? Is this fair or not? Like, what do you want to create? What do you want to do? Um, because it doesn't help us. Like, it doesn't help us. We need to quit the judging because what you're saying is like, I can't ever have that. Underneath that, I talk a lot about in my work, in my coaching, like, the story underneath it. I'm like, I heard your words, but I also heard the underneath story when you said that. And a lot of times when it's like, why do they even need a new car? What you're saying is like, I could never have a new car and I feel bad about that.
Right.
Yeah.
The not fair too is a very modern problem, which is wallowing in victimhood. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors would not do that. They would have your viewpoint, onward and upward. Failure is feedback, right? Like
Yes.
we're not going to
Yeah.
sit here, and it's not fair. Like I always give the example of like this just would never happen. Like two hunter-gatherer hunter dudes hanging out, and they missed the beast during a hunt, which I'm sure happened a lot of the time. And then
Right.
I'm imagining like a conversation by the water hole that never happened, where one guy's like, do you think like I should be a hunter? Like I don't know, I'm so bad at it. I didn't catch anything the last two. Like this wallowing in self-pity, that's a modern thing. That wasn't, they're devising new ways. They're like talking about, okay, the pattern, maybe it's 5 p.m. when they really come running through the field. We got to be there, early, like whatever they would devise a new plan and move on. They didn't wallow in the failure in the thing. So that's what you're saying. And I love that.
Yes, and I love your example. Like, I just have this amazing visual. If I could draw cartoons, I'd do that after this because it's just so
Yeah.
good.
That or
Like,
like the watering hole,
yeah,
okay, Betty dies at the watering hole because the water's tainted. No one's sitting around there crying for Betty. You're like, because at some point someone's going to be like, look, we got to go, man. Animals are coming for Betty. Like we got to get out of here. Right?
right?
Like that water's tainted. We got to move on. We're not going to be able to drink. We've got to keep going. Like it wasn't even an option. And it's too much of an option now because we don't have these survival things to worry about every day. So we've got, quote, new worries. But and I wonder, I'm also wondering about like the hunter gatherers, and I wonder if like they had some of these money,
Right? Like, I'm,
like the hunter gatherer, like hoarder money story, like just never giving up resources. But let's get into the money stories. So
yeah.
let's talk about, we're gonna go up the line here, touch on the first one, which is what that survival one, yeah?
Yeah. Yep. That survival one. So this person, hot potatoes money. This is stressful. Like if money is stressful, it's so interesting because I'm going to preface this with this. As we go through this list, what I get from a lot of my clients or people, they're like, well, I'm a lot of all of them. And I'm like you tell me the story and I'll based on your behavior and your reaction and the adrenaline responses you're getting, I'll tell you which one you are, right?
Yep.
Because they are all very similar, but it's how it shows up and kind of what we think about after or during or how it makes us feel. And so this survival story, um, They hot potato money. They get rid of it as fast as possible. Um, because that is, for a lot of reasons, but that stress and that chaos is it's everywhere in their life, right? So I describe them outside of their money story. They're usually either somebody who's going 100 miles an hour or they're crashed out,
Mm.
right?
And it's always it may come in, but they gotta like work really hard and struggle for it, right? Like it's like full on.
Yeah, struggle, but sometimes it's not. They make it a struggle. Like this
Ah.
is, I worked with a client years ago and she kept telling me how many hours she worked. She was a VA and I knew how much she charged, like just from other conversations. And in my head, I'm like, none of this matches. Like these don't match up. If you're working these hours, like you should be making X, I don't remember what it was, but X amount. I did the math and I'm like, this, and I went to her and I was like, this doesn't work. Well, she was creating all this extra work. She was creating all this time, she'd put off billing for months. So that it was this huge, stressful, took her hours and hours thing, right? And it took me a long time to help her unwind that and be like, go to standard billing. Like if you're doing the same thing every month, first of all, entrepreneurs want to know they're paying you, $500. They don't care if one month it's 425 and one month it's 525. They'd rather budget for $500. So you don't need to bill. Like if you already know what the project costs and that's all you're doing, if you're not taking on extra projects, none of this matters. But yes, so they create extra work. Sometimes it's I would say 90% of the time it's created. Like they create the extra work. They
Mhm.
create the hard for themselves.
Yeah, and that's an addiction to struggle. Very
Yeah.
familiar. And that struggle, and we'll go through this because, like you said, there's some similar thoroughfares here.
Mm-hmm.
They're all sort of that general psychology thing of it may not be good for you or healthy, but what is familiar to you is what you might repeat, right? So, right,
Yep.
you watch your mom get abused, you end up with an abuser. How the fuck would that happen? Logically, that doesn't make sense, but it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense with just general psychology. So, kind of the same here. That's like a familiar. And you mentioned this somewhere else at some point too. It is again that adrenaline, that dopamine hit from
Mm-hmm.
the stress, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
or in a relationship, it's that familiar with like the antagonistic or the push-pull or the right, all those up highs and lows that people get involved with. And you're like, why are they always in these relationships? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's like, what? This seems awful. But yet they're in it with the same person over and over again, right?
So that's the never enough.
Oh, that's survival,
Sorry,
which they
survival.
never have enough because they
Right.
always get rid of it, right? So if they know $1,000 coming in, you can almost bet that they're going to pre-spend 1,500 to 2,000,
Mm.
right? So like these are the people that January 1st, they have their tax refund spent, whether they know the actual amount because they haven't even got right like the W-2 yet. They have what they think spent, and they often spend it 2 and 3 times. If you want another really good example, well, we can talk examples
Yeah.
later. I could save that one.
Yeah, no, yeah, give another one of the survival, and then we'll go on to
Yeah.
the just enough.
So one of my clients, and she's changed the story, which is amazing, but this is such a good example, is she when back in the day she worked in New York, she worked at a fancy restaurant. And so when she got a tip, like an extra big tip, right? Not a standard 20%, but like, a couple $100 extra. Their tips actually got paid out in a check like later or yeah, I think it was still a check. They got paid, right? They take them in on the credit card and they pay you a check like every 2 weeks. They take those big tips like that, or they take all their tips, I think. But she would already tell people, she'd see it hit the credit, see it hit the slip, tell all her friends, I'm buying drinks tonight, right?
Huh?
And she'd go out and she'd spend that extra more than 200, right? She probably spent 300 before it even hit her account,
Hmm.
and then she's struggling to pay her rent because she didn't like hold
Hmm.
on to it for even like a second, right? When it
Oh, it
came
didn't
in,
even
it was
come in
already
yet.
gone.
That's a real
Yeah.
hot potato. A potato didn't
Yeah.
even get in the oven yet. Like a raw
Yeah.
potato. Damn.
Yeah.
That's brutal. They're all brutal. But anyway, so
Yeah.
okay, so let's get into Just Enough. I know the Just Enough story. This was
Hmm.
such a scene. I actually went from Chaser to Just Enough back to something, actually meaningful and worthwhile in my
Yeah.
life, right? And it's not one of these. But um the Just Enough is brutal. You describe it and then I'll say my personal experience with it.
Yeah. So it's where you always have just enough. So money isn't stressful like survival, right? You're not on that dopamine. You're not like, oh my God, I don't have enough money, because you always have just enough. And just enough. These are the people where it's like, shoot, the car broke down. Oh, but they trust like $300 is going to come in to do that repair,
And it
right?
always does.
Right? Always does. Yeah. And then, but it's like if they get $1,000, right? And they scratch off, someone gives them a gift, whatever, they get $1,000 bonus, they know something's going to break. Like the hot water heater's going to go out and take that $1,000.
Yep.
Yep.
That was that. Listen, so me, so to the T, everything. Like some money would come in, the car, something would car would happen, but it always came in. But and you know what? Here's why I know it's so fucked up and true and just so about the mindset because it was like clockwork all
Mm-hmm.
the time. And it was what you're saying. It wasn't stressful, meaning when I was in that story and something would come up, I knew something would come in to cover that, but then you never have enough on top of that. And that
Right.
sucks so bad. And it feels like you're in a cursed cycle. You feel like Sisyphus. You're pushing that rock up the hill and you rolls back down again.
Yep.
It's so fucking horrible. I hated it so much. It's so bad. So anyway, give us a couple more examples of that. I'm trying to think of some other just, I mean, my gosh, even if it was a big thing. And
Yeah.
again, it would be weird because at the time, I would still have this like faith or knowing, like there'd be some faith or knowing, which is a positive thing towards money, right? Like that it
Mm-hmm.
would come in, yet couldn't extend that positive faith to an overflow. Can you
Mm-hmm.
just break this down? Because I was in it. I'm not going to see it as clearly as you will. And it took a while. And by the way, it kept happening no matter how much more money I'd make. You think, oh, I'm going to make more money now. Now I can finally save. Nope. Somehow, Cassie, some fucking how I would always go
Yeah.
back, but always go back. And I was like, this is unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
it's really amazing.
Yeah, I 100%, because it happens always, like one of my very first clients I worked with his story on, she had got a $50,000 inheritance, right? And you're thinking, great, life is good, life is changing. She got sick very quickly after. There was mold in the house she was living, and she had to use that entire 50,000 to get better and to move,
Yep.
like all of it, right? And that was that story. And it's really it's a lot. I'm sure you will totally agree with this. A lot of it has to do with building our self-worth up, being worthy of more. And it's not just like straight, you go do that work, like it's tied into this. But to break it down, it's this one, it's always so interesting to me because it is like clockwork. If you are this, you know this for sure. You actually don't think you're this if you're anything else, right? Usually, unless you think you're survival, because you don't want to admit to that like addiction to stress. That's what I find. They're like, oh yeah, I'm
Ah.
just enough, and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh no, you are like
Yeah, you
you're
just don't want to
you're
admit it, I
creating,
guess.
yeah. Yeah. And so it just becomes a story. The way that I like to describe the money stories is that it's like Cinderella, right? So if we start with once upon a time, and there's two stepsisters and an evil stepmom and a girl named Cinderella, girl's gonna lose her shoe and the prince is gonna find it at the end of how that story ends. Even though there's some other variations, like those parts stay the same. And so every time we get money, it's that same story. Um,
Yeah, and the
like
worthiness
that's our
things,
brain is just programmed.
yeah, the worthiness thing rang a bell because see, I got knocked down to just enough. And the knockdown was when I got my hands disabled. I was making all this money in the corporate world, and then I got knocked down. And there was a lot of worthiness stuff going on there, as you know personally about me with my arms and hands, shame. And I think this level of like, well, I can't now do what everyone can do to make all the money everyone makes in this world. So again, I imprinted, and it turned out not to be true, clearly. But like, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It did. It was because I had a worthy thing that knocked me down to the just enough. I don't even know if I was a
Mhm.
money chaser before, but I was doing really well going after money in a good way. I don't know that I really had a million business ideas. I was just going through that corporate world up the ladder, like doing the thing, and then got knocked down to the just enough. And that's tough. So I'm sure you've seen it too, where it's like a 180 in one way, but people can come to you and get knocked down to something. Like they
Yeah,
had a different money story
absolutely.
that was better, and then it got fucked. And like
Mhm.
I have to then recoup that, right? Which I did, but you know what I mean? That was some work.
You have to do the work. And I would say, I mean, while we're on this self-worth talk, like there's a tie to all of these, right? So that going back to the survival, it's like worthy of space and peace, really. When I
Mm.
get to the deepest work of that survival, right? To not have to be in this constant panic, right? Being worthy of actually like having some peace in your life and then some more peace. And the just enough is being worthy of having money. Because what happens with just enough is you're like, well, why would I save for like that dream trip to Paris? Because something's just going to come up. And so it's like building that self-worth that I'm worthy of more than enough. I'm worthy of this. I'm worthy of these things that I want, not just sort of this basic being able to live.
Oh, so good. All right, let's go into the next one, which is unless you have a just enough success story 180 for us, that's different.
Oh, she did that. Yeah, I did. I have a client and she manifested, she was always just enough. And I remember that was like, it was something that someone even said to her, like a grandparent, or it was something in growing up that she realized later
Mm.
after we had done the work. There's just enough for that, just enough. Like you don't need that.
Ah,
You don't need that. Like that. I don't know if it was a Barbie, but it's like you don't need the Barbie. Here's a just enough version, right?
right.
It's not the real thing, but it's like a Barbie, and really like implementing that. And to be honest, like that person might not have been trying to be mean. Maybe all they could afford, the grandparent could afford
Yeah.
the just enough Barbie. But as a child, we internalize that like, oh, I'm not worth the Barbie. Right. And then that's our work to do as we get to adults.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's go into this money chaser. This
Yeah.
one seems to be the one these are the people that got a million business ideas nonstop.
Got a million business ideas. If you have a friend who's joined more than 5 MLMs, they are definitely a money chaser.
Yeah, when you always say that, I laugh because I'm like, that's just like so perfect, isn't it?
Right. And I had a client, she was like, I think it was 30. And I was
Oh,
like, oh,
jeez.
right. And she's like, I was doing it. I was chasing it, and this was me, right? I had a million ideas. And so for me, they didn't necessarily execute. But for me, the way that it showed up is like, I'm investing in my money. And I had enough. Like I had enough to invest in, enough to live good. But the problem was I didn't have that mindset or the belief that investment was turning out my business at a certain time, right? And I didn't believe like what I needed to do was step back and be like, you have all this money, like you could create what you want instead of chasing it thinking you don't have it already, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I would. That's a really big. And I have a client. She she also did this. She had created basically what she wanted. She amazingly, she did have a lot of success in business. It was back when like Groupon kind of came out, and so she built her massage business on that, and she was full as she wanted to be. She was making, this was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, she was making like 3 grand a month, which in her household, because her husband had a full-time income, like that was all extra, but she didn't see it at the time. But that was like extra cake, $36,000 a year to go on vacation, invest in a property, whatever. And she was doing this and it was easy. Like when we really looked back at it, she was like, oh man, I was working like maybe 2 days a week or just a couple hours, 5 days a week. I had all this freedom. I had all this stuff, but I thought I needed more money. And so she didn't even see that moment where she was making all this money, had all the freedom, had all the things she wanted, right? Because she was so into that chasing mindset that she went and rented a bigger place to open a wellness center. That then guess what? You're in charge of filling this place and paying that rent and helping these other people, which is, by the way, taking away from all of her time for her clients. So she just created this situation that was less of what she wanted because she was chasing more money. And because she listened, there's a lot of other voices that were encouraging. Yeah, like go bigger. You could build a wellness spa, you could
Sure.
big more money, right? But she didn't know enough back then to actually do the numbers and do her budget and sit back and go like, well, what do I want in my life? She maybe could have added 1 day of work if she really wanted to, and but got all the extra money, even more extra money that she wanted from just the business that she had.
So it's like all of these have that theme. There's lots of themes that are through here, but it seems like, first of all, there's like always there's still some kind of struggle with each one of them, right? And like this one, that struggle seems to be that perhaps these people in moments of success can't relax and actually have the things that they wanted in the first place as the motivation to make the money,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't
Yeah.
know. It just seems like. they got to struggle. Like the money's good, but then the life's not good.
Yeah, like we're not seeing that. We're not enjoying the money. Like speaking as a former money chaser, I wasn't enjoying. And that was when my life changed, by the way, when that sort of like clicked and I went, yeah, I'm not going after this business. Like I'm missing out on my life. I'm going to go focus on my life, which is, by the way, it was like within a year I had created the financial independence to leave my job when I
Right.
actually saw
And isn't
that.
that the enjoyable part, you would say? Like
Yeah.
just that, right? Like you actually went and just, I remember you've talked about it before. You're like, I went and had like fun. I just went and had fun and enjoyed my shit. And then like things came together because you
Yeah.
stepped away from that chasing.
Absolutely.
How how long do you feel it took you to really change that story where you started to see that it wasn't the case anymore?
Ooh. So I think what happened for me is I think it's different for me than my client. So for me, what I think happened is I had started doing this like money mindset work, right? I really started shifting those beliefs and building things and it was the point where I had already realized like I need to grow into the story I want instead of fix all these things that I think are wrong or keeping me from making money.
Right.
And so I had been shifting that and growing a better story. Um, like I honestly want to say for about 2 years before the light bulb moment. And then like all that growth. And so maybe it wasn't quite 2 years. I'm trying to think now, like add up, figure out when it was. But I would say I had, because as I was trying to grow my business, right, and still doing these chasing things, I was also working on my mindset. And I think that work on the mindset is what all of a sudden culminated in this light bulb, like step back, have fun, like let go, so that I could see it. And so I didn't necessarily equate it to a money story then because I didn't know what I know now. I hadn't studied as many people. But I would say that it took 2 years. And I don't think it takes 2 years for my clients. Because then I've developed a system that we get you, first of all, we make you aware up front. Like if you're a money chaser, like, okay. So then as I coach you, I know as you grow, if you're kind of hopping back into that tendency, I'm like, hey, let's step back. Like, are you allowing yourself to have what you want? You
Hmm.
know? And so I think for them, it's a lot quicker than it was for me.
What's after this one? Is it the money hot mess?
Yes, no money hot mess.
I think
Um,
everyone kind of can imagine what that is.
Yeah, right. I literally named it because when I asked these people, they were like, "Oh, it's a hot mess." And these are the people which this is an interesting story because this is the person that doesn't have to, they've never really had to worry about money. And they haven't. They don't have a budget. They don't need a budget. It flows in, it flows out. And not in the way like just enough, where like there's just enough. Like, no, there's enough. They're doing fun things, they're doing this, they're doing that. And for them, it just comes one day and they're like, shoot, like I've been making X amount, I've been making 50 grand, 100 grand for all these years. And this is what's in my bank account. And this is what I have here. And there just comes a moment where they're like, I think I should have more. Right.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's
More
a
to show
very,
for it
more to show for it. Yeah.
in terms of material stuff, experiences, everything.
All of it. Yeah. And I think more like mostly sort of in their savings and their way forward in life.
Hmm.
Right. And it might come down to like, if I had to like have like a more choices feeling like, ooh, I've been living this, I've been making this, but I feel a little stuck in the amount that's in my savings account or my investment account. Or now I want to do this and some other people have saved, but I didn't. Like, they lived a really good life. They just never thought about it.
Right. Never planned or anything, just was in the moment and too much in the moment, maybe.
Yeah.
What what about is there another
Hold
one? Is there
tight.
like a hoarder one or something? I
Yeah.
always
Like
feel
the
like
hold tight.
was this what hold tight is what that is?
Yeah. This is
Okay,
the
yeah, this one's
person.
amazing,
Yeah.
actually.
This is the person who will like drive. I describe this because almost everybody goes, oh, I know that person. They'll like drive 30 minutes across town to save like 5 cents on gas.
Yep.
And you're like, but it cost you an hour of your life. Like,
Right.
they're like,
Right.
yeah, yeah, but I saved a whole dollar if you add it up. Um,
My dad
and
used to do that in later years, and he was unsuccessful. He was successful and then unsuccessful, so his money
Mhm.
story changed. And
Yeah.
He would drive to like three different, and we'd be like, "What are you doing?" Like the car, the gas money. If you do the cost benefit analysis, I'm just not sure this works out.
Right? Yeah. Like,
Wait, tell the story about the person you had a client who was uh the sleeping on the floor in the mattress because the
yeah.
mattress was good. Tell that one. That's unbelievable. Hold tight story.
Right. I know. So I had this woman, and this is actually when I discovered this story, because the thing about this story is they don't often make their way to my world because they hold too tight. They're rarely gonna invest. They
Ah,
come from like this person,
yeah, of
I right?
course.
They
That
come
makes
like
total sense.
other ways, right? And so I'm talking about this, how I just, realized that this is a story. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that's me." She goes, "Yeah, this mattress that I wanted, I knew was going to be on sale in 6 months. So I slept on the floor for
Oh.
6 months to save. I don't even think it was like $1,000. I was like,
I think at one
what?
point, I think it was only like a couple hundred or something,
I
but it
think it
was,
was,
and
yeah.
it was like 6 months of floor. And like, if you did the cost, it was, I think you broke it down. You were like, it would have been like $30 a month to not
Yes.
sleep on the
To not
floor.
sleep on the floor. And like it never like but the we talk about like all of these stories have their self-worth component. That saving money is fueling that worthiness, right? Like, oh, but
That's
I
their hit.
saved.
That's their
Yeah.
dopamine hit is the
Yep.
saving. Yeah.
Yep. The saving. And
Versus
that's
like the spender or versus the right. It's like that's their dopamine hit maybe. This one is like they get something out of that holding tight.
yeah, absolutely. You're right. That is their dopamine, right? And they're proud. Like those of us
Hmm.
are like $30 would cost you $30 to not sleep on the floor. And they're like, they're holding up the gold medal. And we're all like, what? But that is how good it feels to them to like sacrifice to save that, right? Because it's all about the savings. It's not actually about the experience most times. It's about the savings.
I got one of the worst hold tight stories anyone's ever gonna hear. It's actually recent. But it's two brothers. They're both, well, one's now dead, but they were like in their 80s, so they're old. It's like my friend's father. Um, they were so poor growing up when they moved to LA, and in fact, like I think the sister died because they couldn't afford a cab to the hospital. So what that does
Oh,
to
wow.
the rest of your family, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
anyway, this guy literally at this moment worth $100 million. Never once in all of his years, he's 84. He's never gone on a vacation. He's never enjoyed his life. He's barely even had a girlfriend. He's never even, the only thing he's ever bought is a nice car. He eats three old day old, like moldy avocados. His house is just hoarder, central, beautiful, huge $1 million house, like almost condemned, never took care of it. Just a mess, but yet, and then always will hire people for his companies, but like goes cheap. So then like they, rip him off, but still manages to have all this money. Never enjoyed it for his life. And his brother recently died. And they found out when he died, this guy also, he had abandoned lots near the Hollywood sign that are worth 10, $15 million that they just found out
Oh my
about.
gosh.
This guy he is worth 100 million. And he also never enjoyed his life. And they both come from this, and they both had that story, like the worst
Mhm.
hold tight I've ever seen. So as we were going through life, I would make sure to call this out to my friend and I'd be like, hey, make sure, because they're going after stuff and they're very successful. But I was like, make sure you enjoy it. You don't follow that pattern. I mean, I know people are listening are like, they're like, how dare they not enjoy it, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
this is goes to show you how this is all about mindset. That's why Cassie's on here today and we're talking about it because that is like real stuff. And then we look and we go, oh my God, they never. But for them, they might have enjoyed it because those constant dopamine hits. Maybe they're hold
Hmm.
tight, hold them to the end, but they weren't happy. That's for sure. And the one that's still alive definitely isn't. It's just
Yeah.
clear. Yeah.
I know those stories break my heart because it is all mindset. It's all like unwinding those things that happened and choosing like, man, I'm worthy of a good life. I'm worthy of like feeling good in my space and taking a vacation, however big or small that is, and eating food that is not like moldy, like that just reminds me of my sixth grade teacher. He always bought like the meat off the day old. Like
Mm.
he was definitely a hold tight. I don't even know about his money situation, but I could tell by his behavior looking back, like that's who he was. And I think even in sixth grade, we were like, why are you doing that? You
Right.
know? Hmm.
It's almost too, there's self-worth there that you don't deserve the money you are earning or
Oh, for
deserve to do
sure.
anything with it, that you have to, eat this crap or have a shitty house with paint falling off the walls. And you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Um, so you have, I mean, you have a bunch of books. Everyone can look up Cassie Parks on Amazon. And you've got podcast with Ginny Gain that I love, Manifest It Now, doing all sorts of stuff. But I would love you to share some of the fun exercises that you've created over all these years. And I know there's a million of them, but things that people can do to start changing their vibration around money, even if it's like I had a friend the other day who was like, you know what I did? I cleaned out my wallet. I realized I was not like respecting my money. I needed to like, or just, and again, these are all ritualistic type of things, but they can imprint the subconscious if you're doing them with a certain intention. So can you give us a couple of like, fun things to if someone's hating it right now in any one of these categories, what they can do to look at money in a different way?
Absolutely. Clean out your wallet, clean out the space where you have your bills or anywhere where you handle money is a great one. That's where we always start. Like we start with cleaning out those spaces, like just opening that fresh energy. And it doesn't have to be like sort of any sort of, oh man, I'm not doing this right, or should be taking, like you can just clean it with that intention of, ooh, like I'm shifting, I'm opening, like there's space for more money. I really like it to be, create space. And because that exercise, gets bigger as you go and becomes like actual space in your life and your time. But just start with cleaning that out, right? I just go back. I don't even know where I learned this exercise, but we even like, have my people like clap around where they make their money
Mm,
because clapping breaks up stagnant energy. So you're
mm,
really just kind of like opening, freshening that space. And then one of the favorites, there's a couple. One of the favorites that people have that like still makes them smile is we just do a money hunt. So you go get some bills, right? Whatever's the most comfortable you feel taking out. So if you're like, oh, I could live without $100, you could get 520s, right? If it's only, I can only just get 5 ones, you get 5 ones, like whatever feels comfortable. And then you can grow with this exercise as well. And you can either, like, if you live with someone or you have a kid or a friend, you can have them hide them in places in your house. Or you can hide them because you'd be amazed at how often we forget, and then you open that drawer
yes.
and it's like, oh, there's money.
Oh, I
Oh,
like
there's
that.
money.
Putting it in
Yeah.
pockets and then like randomly you'll be like, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And just that building that, oh, there's money here. There's money here in this very fun way. And I think a lot of my clients would tell you, like when they first had that assignment, they were like, oh my gosh, this is sort of lame. This isn't going to be cool. And then like over the years, like they'll find like a 20 in a book that they hid in the beginning. They're like, oh my God, I was so excited. I opened that book and there's a $20 bill, because they've shifted, and they're like, yes, there's money everywhere. And so it just builds
Yeah,
that
seems lame,
practice.
but the return later seems obviously worth it.
Yeah. And and they're like, I'm hiding it again because it's so fun. So that's one of like my most fun. One of them to really kind of get into just a deep, and this is going back to what we talked about in the beginning. This is not about a judgment. This is just observation, right? Which really starts to help open some of like, it helps us to see what we're thinking or believing about money. And I did this exercise. I always love as a coach when I create an exercise and I think it's going to go one way and it totally opens a lot of other doors a different way.
Mm,
um, but you get, it's best if you can do 100. I love using $100 bill. Again, if a 20 is all you can get out, whatever it is, get the biggest that you can take out and live without for like a day. Getting a $100 bill and actually physically holding it and a penny and just holding them and notice your different beliefs about them. Like,
hmm
are you judging the pennies not enough, right? Are you realizing like, it's just 1,000 pennies is the same as that $100 bill, right? Like, are you seeing them as the same? Are you having an inner dialogue or an inner conflict? Just sort of, it's a great way to put that mirror in front of you to sort of see those things that you're saying about money that you might not realize.
Mm, I love
Yeah.
that one. I
Yeah.
also love what about that? I mean, there's always this classic one, right? Of like if you taking out as much as you can, but let's say it's $100 bill and you don't spend it, but it's in your wallet. Just
Yep.
A to make you feel good. There's $100 there, but then like vibrationally spending that, and getting out of the
Mhm.
like I can have it versus looking at things around you and being like I can't. Can you tell us about that and some other ways we can, you know what I mean, kind of trick ourselves and play some games?
Yeah, I love like an intentional spending, right? So whether it's you
Mhm.
have that $100 bill in your wallet and then you decide on a day to pull it out. I love like deciding, okay, I got this or I did this. There doesn't even have to be a reason, but I'm going to go intentionally. And me, we haven't talked about it on this podcast yet, but I always say invest rather than spend, because
Yes.
invest, we expect a return, right? Spend, we expect it to be gone.
Yeah, I do like that word is that's where the words have power. And I feel like that's a really great distinction you just made. I've got to keep getting into the habit. I often do use that word, but you're right. That's a great shift right there, just on a word.
Yeah. So I love being intentionally spending, whether it's that $100 that you have in your wallet and then you decide one day I'm going to spend it, or just deciding, hey, I'm going to do an exercise and I'm going to go invest $50 or $100. I can even make $20. I did this exercise with a friend a long time ago. We are like, okay, let's start with $1. Like, how much fun could we have for $1? Right. And we're like, oh, we could go buy like, I don't think you could still do this in downtown Denver, but like we could go buy a hot dog at this giant park, right, for $1. Or we could do this. We could grab, a drink and go sit at the park and talk to each other. But I love, instead of going to the store, and sort of we get in this habit of going to the store and buying things. Like sometimes we have a list, a grocery list or whatever, but sometimes we just stop by, some of those stores and we walk in looking, shopping, right? Instead, go, okay, I have $50 and I want to invest in it. What do I want to do with it? Where do I want to go? How do I want to invest it? And really, even, I mean, it's fun, but it's also a great way to notice those thoughts in your head and what's happening. And are you justifying, right? You can even start to put some fun rules like, oh, I have to spend it on one thing. If I've never, if I'm not in the habit of buying something that's 50 or 100. And it's not about wasting or spending a ton of money. It's about developing these new pathways and having these new opportunities to look at your thoughts about that, right? So when you go spend that $100 thing, or you immediately like, I can't spend $100 on one piece of clothing. That's too much. That's too much. That's such a waste. I could buy 5 shirts over here. I could do this. I could do that. And when you can notice that, you can go, oh, deep breath. But what if I loved one shirt more than 5 shirts? And you can start to see that. And then, because I think a lot of times we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we go like spend because it's a deal, right? We take something because it's cheaper and we're like, oh, it's okay that I don't love it. It was only $10. It was only $20. It was only however much, right?
Mhm.
Instead of investing in what we love. And so doing these type of exercises that are out of the normal, or sort of reverse, okay, I'm going to go find something to spend $50 on, intentionally. I want it in deciding like, well, how do I want it to make me feel? Do I want it to make me feel excited? Do I want it to be like something that's really going to make my life easier? Do I want it to be like a pampering thing, right? And really, like, we're becoming more conscious of how we spend our money and the choices that we make about it.
Yeah, I think it's just that's such an interesting thing to just ask oneself about anytime you spend money, right? Like, hey, is this going to
Yeah.
favor me or am I doing this to do it? With the thing I normally do this, if I were to just take what I'm looking at right now and not spend on that and maybe do it towards something intentional, that could just be a move, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
tell us, and I mean, obviously the subject is so broad, so wide. You've written books about it, been talking about it for years. What's what would you say the best way would be if people are like, I need to learn more about Cassie and what she teaches? Where do they go and how do they find this out?
Yeah. Like if you are really super into it, you're like, I need more. I want the trainings. I want the books. I would go to BeeKonnected.com and get a free account and find Manifest Money in Your Dream Life on there, or Cassie Parks. Um, and look at my profile, you'll find all of my books though. You find all the courses, Manifest Money in Your Dream Life. I'm actually not currently taking clients, but I always love sharing about this stuff. So you can find all my books on my profile. They'll also be on Manifest Money and Your Dream Life soon on there. Just everything all together. So you can go check that out. You could join our group if you want, kind of like daily inspiration posts and stuff like that. We have a group where we post that. You can go in there and get it. And that's where I'm hanging out for the future. So,
Yeah, and
um,
that's Be Connected. It's BEE and then connected, but with a K.
Yeah.
Konnected.
ECTED. Yep.
Got it.
BeeKonnected.com. Um, and yeah, that's where I'm hanging out. I'm moving all my business over there, and I have trained amazing coaches. If you're interested in taking a money manifesting course, and when you manifest money, you naturally change a lot of these beliefs. Because
Yes.
I believe in moving towards something, right? Rather than away from what we don't want. Let's move toward 10,000 and up level the beliefs along the way instead of try to fix them. And I have two amazing coaches that have completely changed their money story. One of them is the one who would go out to the bar and, spend all that money. And now she's an actor. Like, she makes enough that she gets to take these acting roles. She gets paid for the acting, but it was never like enough to cover her job, right? With the time commitment. But she makes enough, last year she got a new job. She works half the time and makes double the money. And I think that's even higher because she just had a day where she made like triple what she normally makes because she's gotten so good at this. And she's trying to become a coach. And so she's building up her clients and taking clients now. So you'd be in good hands if that's something you want.
I love it. And then what are you excited about in life right now? And what are you manifesting? What's going on with your world of money?
My world of money is that I sat on it, and I have found an investment. And I actually manifested the opportunity to become an equity investor in BeeKonnected. Um, because I took advantage of one investment, and they said like, "Hey, you seem serious." And they had told me before. I had asked, "What's the number you're looking at?" And it was more than I had available. They gave me the range, and I was like, "Oh, I can't be an equity investor." So I just did what I could. And they saw that, and they saw my belief in the system, and they said, "Hey, do you want to become an equity investor?" And I was like, "Yes." And so this is one of my dreams, is to get to invest in a startup. I also have accepted the position of chief learning officer. So I am in the C-suite, and I get to help this company grow that I know is going to empower so many future entrepreneurs, because it has so many things that I wish were in one system when I started my business.
I love it. Yeah, everyone check out BeeKonnected.com. Thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to share with us about money or people's money stories on our way out here?
Just you can create a better one. Just start choosing it little by little each day, and you can write a much better money story than whatever you're living. Even if your money story is great, you can write an even better one. So, you have that power. Just use it.
I love it. Thank you so much for reaching out. We will put a link to connect with Cassie in the show notes. And thank you so much, Cassie, and everyone else. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, I would so appreciate you leaving a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about partner discounts on amazing products, visit ellruss.com/discounts.